Hey there, I'm Sophia, a 35-year-old single mom just trying to make sense of this crazy world. It's just me, my amazing 12-year-old daughter, Emily, and our little home in the suburbs. It might not be fancy, but it's ours. I work as a nurse, putting in long, grueling shifts to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. Emily is a special kid, sharp as a tack and bursting with creativity. She's got this wild curly hair that could give Rapunzel a run for her money, and she loves expressing herself through it. Then there's Gertrude, my ex-mother-in-law and constant headache. She's a 68-year-old widow who lives far too close for comfort. Sure, she helps out with Emily after school, but her nagging drives me up the wall. Sophia, don't you think Emily's hair is a bit wild? Gertrude's voice grates on my nerves as I hurry to get ready for work. I take a deep breath. It's just hair, Gertrude. She likes it that way. In my day, young ladies knew how to present themselves properly. She huffs. I bite my tongue, reminding myself that beggars can't be choosers when it comes to free childcare. Thank God for Sarah, my best friend and fellow nurse. She's my anchor, always there to listen or lend a hand with Emily when Gertrude becomes unbearable. Girl, I don't know how you deal with that old bat, Sarah says over coffee one day. You've got the patience of a saint. I laugh. Trust me, it's running thin. Then there's Michael, my neighbor. He's a total sweetheart, always offering to help around the house. I'd be lying if I said I hadn't noticed how he looks at me. But after everything with Emily's dad, I'm in no rush to dive back into the dating scene. Hey, Sophia, need a hand with that? Michael calls out as I fumble with some boxes in the driveway. Thanks, Michael. You're a lifesaver, I say, trying not to notice how his shirt clings to his arms as he lifts the box. Life isn't perfect, but with good neighbors and the occasional handsome handyman, it's not all bad. The real drama in my life is the constant tug-of-war with Gertrude over how to raise Emily. Emily, sit up straight, a lady doesn't slouch, Gertrude scolded during dinner one night. I saw Emily's shoulders slump even more. Mom, do I have to listen to her? Emily asked, her eyes pleading with me. Just try your best, sweetie, I said, shooting Gertrude a sharp look. We all have different ideas about what's important, I added. Different ideas indeed, Gertrude muttered under her breath. If you just listened to me, Sophia, that child wouldn't be running wild. I clenched my fists under the table. Emily is not running wild, she's expressing herself, and I won't stifle that. Mark my words, Sophia, Gertrude said, her voice icy. Without proper discipline, that girl will end up in trouble. As I watched Emily retreat to her room, her wild curls bouncing behind her, I wondered how long I could keep this delicate balance. Something had to give, and when it did, it wasn't going to be pretty. I was dead on my feet after another grueling shift at the hospital. All I wanted was to hug my baby girl and collapse into bed. But the moment I stepped through the door, I knew something was wrong. Emily, sweetie, I'm home, I called out. But there was no answer, just an eerie silence that made my skin crawl. I found her curled up in bed, sobbing. When she looked up at me, my heart nearly stopped. Her beautiful curls were gone, every single one. Her head had been shaved clean. Mom, Emily wailed, throwing herself into my arms. Grandma, she did it while I was sleeping. I held her tightly, my mind spinning. Shoo, baby, it's okay. We'll fix this, I whispered, but inside, I was screaming. How could Gertrude do this to my child? Fury surging through me, I stormed into the living room where Gertrude sat, calm as ever. What the hell did you do? I shouted. She didn't even flinch. I did what needed to be done. That child was becoming far too vain and disobedient. Vain? Disobedient? She's a 12-year-old girl, I snapped. Precisely, Gertrude replied coolly. It's high time she learned some discipline. This isn't your day, Gertrude. I cut her off, shaking with rage. This is assault. I'm calling the police. Gertrude scoffed. Don't be dramatic. Sophia, I've put up with your lenient parenting long enough. Someone had to step in before Emily turned into a delinquent like her father. That's when I lost it. Get out of my house, now. Gladly, Gertrude sneered, gathering her things. Mark my words, you'll regret not heeding my advice. That girl needs a firm hand. as the door slammed behind her. The full weight of what had just happened hit me like a ton of bricks. I sank to the floor, tears streaming down my face. Then suddenly, there was a knock at the door. It was Michael at the door, his face full of concern. "Sophia, is everything okay?" I heard shouting. One look at me, and he knew it wasn't. "What happened?" he asked, his voice soft but urgent. I couldn't find the words. My throat tightened, and all I could do was point toward Emily's room. Michael walked in, and when he saw her, his eyes widened in shock. "Oh my God, who did this?" "Gertrude," I managed to choke out, my voice trembling with fury. His expression hardened. "That's it. I'm calling the police." "No," Emily cried, her voice breaking. "I don't want anyone to see me like this." She looked so small, so vulnerable. I pulled her into my arms, trying to soothe her. "It's okay, baby. We won't do anything you're not comfortable with," I whispered, my heart aching. Michael knelt beside us, his tone gentle. "Is there anything I can do?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. "Sophia, what's going on? I got your missed call, and you sounded upset in the voicemail." Through my sobs, I tried to explain. "Gertrude, she shaved Emily's head." "That evil witch," Sarah exclaimed. "I'm coming over right now." In no time, Sarah burst through the door, her arms loaded with bags. "Okay, I've got hats, scarves, and some cute pixie-cut photos for inspiration. We're going to get through this," she declared, her voice filled with determination. Emily managed a weak smile as Sarah worked her magic, trying to salvage what was left of her hair, while Sarah busied herself with Emily. I sat down with Michael and told him the whole sordid history with Gertrude, the years of tension, the endless battles, and how I had let her get too close. "I can't believe I ever let that woman near Emily," I said, the guilt clawing at me. Michael squeezed my hand, his voice steady. "This isn't your fault, Sophia. You were just trying to do right by your daughter. You were doing your best." His words were comforting, but deep down, I knew this was far from over. Sarah chimed in, her voice firm. "The only person to blame here is that old bat, Gertrude." I nodded, but the guilt gnawed at me. How could I have been so blind? As the night wore on, Emily finally drifted into an exhausted sleep. Sarah and Michael insisted on staying, setting up camp in the living room. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I made a silent vow. Gertrude would pay for what she had done, one way or another. My baby girl deserved nothing less. The next few days were a blur of tears, anger, and sleepless nights. Emily refused to leave her room, let alone go to school. I called in sick, knowing she needed me more than anything. "Sweetie, you can't hide forever," I said gently, sitting on the edge of her bed. "I look like a freak." "Mom," Emily sobbed, "everyone's going to laugh at me." My heart shattered all over again. "No, baby, you're beautiful, inside and out. We'll get through this together." Our first stop was the police station, but it was a massive disappointment. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but since there was no physical harm, this is a civil matter," the officer said, barely looking up from his desk. "No physical harm?" I exploded, gesturing toward Emily. "Look at my daughter." But rules were rules, apparently. So, our next stop was a lawyer. "We can definitely pursue charges for emotional abuse," the lawyer explained, "and sue for damages. But it won't be easy." I didn't care. I was out for blood. Sarah was a rock through it all, helping me document everything, photos, timelines, you name it. She kept me focused. "We're going to nail that old witch to the wall," Sarah declared as we worked late into the night, and I was determined to make sure she was right. Meanwhile, Michael was working his own magic. "I've got a buddy who specializes in family law," he told me. "Top-notch guy. He's willing to take your case pro bono." I could have kissed him right then and there, but there was no time for that. Things were about to get even messier. It started with whispers at the grocery store, sidelong glances from neighbors, then came the calls from distant relatives. "Sophia, is it true you've been neglecting Emily?" my cousin asked, concern dripping from her voice. That's when it hit me. Gertrude was on the offensive. "She's telling everyone I'm an unfit mother," I raged to Sarah and Michael. "That witch is trying to turn the whole world against me." But Gertrude had underestimated me. I started digging, calling up old babysitters, family friends, anyone who'd ever interacted with her and Emily. The stories I uncovered made my blood run cold. Grandma said if I told you, she'd send me away to boarding school, Emily confessed one night, tears streaming down her face. She used to lock me in the closet when I misbehaved. I pulled her close, fury and guilt battling inside me. How could I have missed this? It's not your fault, sweetie, I assured her, holding back my own tears. But I promise you, Grandma will never hurt you again. With Sarah and Michael's help, we devised a plan. Hidden cameras went up around the house. We coached Emily on how to safely gather evidence if Gertrude tried to contact her. Remember, kiddo, Michael said, showing Emily how to use the voice recorder on her phone. If Grandma calls or comes over, hit this button right away. Emily nodded solemnly. I won't let you down, Mom. You can never let me down, baby, I said, hugging her tightly. We're in this together. As we finalized our preparations, a grim determination settled over me. Gertrude thought she could bully and manipulate her way to victory, but she had no idea what was coming. This mama bear was ready to fight, and I wasn't about to lose. All right, team, I said, looking at Sarah and Michael, let's take this witch down. The trap was set. Now all we had to do was wait for Gertrude to make her move, and when she did, we'd be ready. The day of the trial finally arrived, and my stomach churned with nerves. Emily squeezed my hand as we walked into the courtroom. You got this, Mom, she whispered. Our lawyer presented the mountain of evidence we had collected. The hidden camera footage was damning, showing Gertrude barging into our home, screaming threats at Emily. You ungrateful little brat. Her voice echoed in the courtroom. I'll teach you to disobey me. I saw the judge's face darken, but that was just the beginning. One by one, witnesses took the stand, former babysitters, family friends, even Emily's old piano teacher. Each one shared chilling stories of Gertrude's cruelty. Piece by piece, the case against her grew stronger, and I could see her smug confidence slowly crumbling. She told me if I didn't make Emily practice for 3 hours a day, she'd have me fired, the piano teacher testified. But the rail kicker came when Emily took the stand. My brave girl stood there, her voice trembling but resolute. Grandma said if I ever told Mom what she did, she'd make sure I was taken away, Emily said, her eyes welling up with tears. My heart shattered as I watched her speak, tears streaming down my face. How had I not seen this? Gertrude's lawyer tried to spin her as a concerned grandmother, but it was too late. The truth was out, and everyone could see it. When the judge finally announced his decision, I nearly collapsed from relief. This court grants a permanent restraining order against the defendant, he declared. Furthermore, significant damages are awarded for the plaintiff's therapy and emotional distress. It was over. Gertrude was out of our lives for good. Outside the courtroom, Gertrude approached us, tears in her eyes. Sophia, Emily, I'm so sorry, she began. I cut her off, my voice cold. Save it, Gertrude, you're dead to us. Without looking back, we walked away, and for the first time in years, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The next few months were tough, but we got through it together. Emily started therapy and, little by little, began coming out of her shell. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table with Sarah and Michael, Emily made an announcement. I want to donate the money from the lawsuit, she said, her voice steady, to help other kids like me. I couldn't have been prouder of her. As for me and Michael, well, let's just say he became a permanent fixture in our lives. His steady support through everything meant the world to us. But the real turning point came about 6 months after the trial. I think the question of whether some betrayals are unforgivable is deeply personal and complex. It really depends on the context of the betrayal, the nature of the relationship, and individual values and experiences. In cases where trust has been profoundly violated, like with Gertrude's actions, forgiveness can be incredibly difficult. Some people might find it hard to move past such deep hurts, and in those cases, the focus might shift to healing and moving forward rather than reconciliation. On the other hand, forgiveness can be a powerful tool for personal peace and growth. It doesn't always mean forgetting or reconciling, but it can be about releasing the hold that anger or resentment has on you. Sometimes, Forgiveness can even pave the way for personal transformation and a healthier future, even if it doesn't include the person who caused the harm. Ultimately, whether or not to forgive and how to handle betrayal is a personal decision. It's important to do what feels right for your own well-being and growth. Do you think there are certain boundaries that should never be crossed? Or do you see forgiveness as a way to heal even the deepest wounds? My name is Kate. I'm a 48-year-old homemaker. In this day and age, some might think being a homemaker is enviable. But I'm not the kind of homemaker who lives in luxury on my husband's earnings. Ben, should I help you wipe down? I'm sorry. Ben, who's in his mid-60s, had a stroke a decade ago when he was still full of energy. Since then, he's been bedridden. All this time, I've been caring for him. We used to worry about not being able to have children when we were younger. But now I see it as a blessing that allows me to devote myself to caregiving. Life is strange, isn't it? Ben's body doesn't move as he wishes, but his mind is clear. Maybe that's why. He always seems to feel sorry towards me. But I wish he wouldn't. I don't find this life too burdensome. Sure, caregiving support services have increased compared to the past, and it's not like I can't take a break at all. But I started caregiving in my 30s, and now I'm in my 40s. I can't deny that my physical strength isn't what it used to be. So, naturally, I wish for some support. From my husband. Could you give me a hand? And then, I'm busy right now. Tom, my husband said. I might understand if he were actually working. But how is lying on the sofa and fiddling with his mobile phone busy? If you're just looking at your phone, help out. It's your dad, after all. I'm supporting by working, aren't I? Let me rest at least on my days off. Saying that, my husband frowned irritably and stood up to leave the room. It's always the same. He doesn't lift a finger. Even if he can't help with caregiving, it would be nice if he at least took care of himself. My husband, hand on the door, turned back and said, "Oh yeah, I have a business trip for the next 3 days. Get everything ready." Again? Can't you at least? I'm busy. You should do that much as a wife. Shouting, my husband left the room. Does preparing himself challenge his pride? We're supposed to support each other as a married couple. How did it come to this? No choice. I'll get some help after the helper comes. I sighed and kept staring at the door through which my husband had left. Is that boy off on a business trip again? The night my husband left for his trip, as I was drinking coffee, Linda showed up. Linda, who can't get by without her cane due to mobility issues, is otherwise sharp. While Ben was sleeping, I took a break and helped Linda sit down by taking her hand and guiding her to a chair. After taking a sip of the freshly brewed coffee and exhaling, Linda said with a hint of sadness, "He's always away on business trips several times a month. I wonder if that's really the case." Well, who knows? Linda and I are probably thinking the same thing. Harboring the same suspicions. Infidelity. That word flickers through my mind. But I deliberately don't voice it. What difference does it make if I find out about my husband's infidelity? He'll surely deny it, and gathering evidence would cost money and effort. But I don't have the luxury to deal with that right now. My affection for my husband is almost non-existent. And naturally, his affection towards me is the same. But having lost my own parents early, my in-laws are as precious to me as my own. I can't abandon them. After all, my husband does contribute financially to the household, so maybe it's better to leave his issues be. After a long life of caregiving, I've given up. It wasn't always like this. My husband used to be kind to me when we were distressed about not being able to have children. He used to be dutiful to his parents. But as soon as the caregiving for his parents began, he changed as if he were a different person. Acting on his own whims, almost as if he was single. He started leaving home frequently, claiming he was on business trips. He grew colder, not just towards his parents, but towards me as well. "You're such an unattractive woman, eating with you ruins my appetite." After being bluntly told that, we started eating separately. Now, my husband eats alone, while I feed Ben and share meals with Linda. "I don't want to sleep in the same room." Since he said that, I've been sleeping on the living room sofa. But the kind and grateful words from my caring in-laws somehow kept me going. Just when I was feeling the distance from my husband, another troubling issue arose. The money my husband was bringing home decreased. Despite discussing various problems, he stubbornly insisted his salary had decreased. But I knew he was lying. I happened to see his pay stub. To my surprise, his salary had actually increased. I wondered if he had received a promotion, but that wasn't the important part. The problem was that he was lying and reducing the money for the household. "That's quite a sum for your parents' taxi fares to the hospital and hiring helpers. Our living expenses are..." What? Managing with the money provided is a homemaker's duty. If you can't do that, you're failing as a homemaker. If you can't even manage that, what value do you have? No matter how much I pleaded, my husband wouldn't listen. Seeing this, my in-laws seemed apologetically again. They even offered their meager pensions to help with the living expenses. Feeling sorry, I struggled to make ends meet with the money my husband gave. As a result, our meals became vegetable-centered and modest. My in-laws claimed to prefer such meals, but my husband would say, "How can I eat such plain food?" And he started dining out every night. Consequently, the money he brought home decreased even more. A vicious cycle that also lessened his time at home. And in proportion, my spirit dwindled away. On that particular day, Ben's condition suddenly worsened. A stroke had recurred. In no time at all, Ben passed away. Initially, I was stunned, but then tears wouldn't stop flowing. Linda and I hugged and cried in front of Ben, who looked as if he were merely sleeping. At that time, my husband was, yet again, on a business trip. When I finally calmed down a bit and called him, "Hello? Who's this?" A woman answered the phone, to my shock. My husband was in the midst of an affair. "Hey, don't just pick up like that." I heard my husband's voice, sounding flustered as he snatched the phone away. Normally, I'd be seething with anger in such a situation. But having just lost Ben, my heart felt numb, and I was surprisingly calm. Without confronting him about the affair, I simply informed him that Ben had passed away. "Oh, really?" His response was disconcertingly brief. Can someone be this indifferent about their own father's death? To me, my husband seemed as alien as a being from another planet. No, that's an insult to aliens. Even in space, I believe there's some sense of parent-child bond. Throughout the funeral, my husband maintained a detached demeanor, merely going through the motions of being the chief mourner. Relatives consoled the grieving Linda. Meanwhile, the actual son seemed to spend most of the time fiddling with his mobile phone and yawning. Everyone looked at my husband with disdain. Because of him, Ben's funeral, whom I dearly loved, became a dismal affair. A month passed since then. Between dealing with the aftermath of Ben's death and caring for Linda's mental health, time flew by. My husband was in an exceptionally good mood today. Because today was the day Ben's will was to be disclosed. Ben had prepared a notarized will, which doesn't require court verification. It was kept in the lawyer's office. Today, Linda was to bring it from the office and open it. Normally, one would assume the inheritors to be Linda, the wife, and my husband, the only son. I wondered if there was really a need for a will. Could there be a secret child? With bated breath, I watched the proceedings, reminding myself that as a DIL, I had no rights to the inheritance. The lawyer, called in for this day, along with relatives of both in-laws, were present as witnesses. As everyone watched, the lawyer opened and read the will. That was, Linda was to inherit the house and land, and half of all other assets. That was expected. But what followed was shocking. The remaining half wasn't left to my husband, the son. What? Kate and I are to inherit the remaining half equally? My husband stood up, shouting in disbelief. Indeed. The will unexpectedly left part of the inheritance to me. Stunned, I watched as my husband pointed at me and yelled furiously. Why does my wife have to take the inheritance? I'm the real son. Everything, apart from Mom's share, should obviously come to me. But the will states, I don't care. It's invalid. Invalid. My husband screamed at the lawyer. I was speechless, shocked by the sudden turn of events. But what my husband said next left me completely astounded. I was the one who mostly took care of Dad. She didn't do much. What? What is this man saying? I already knew he was a liar, but this lie was too much. He took care of Ben mostly? Who could say such a thing? I couldn't stay silent anymore and was about to speak when. What are you talking about? Have some shame, you foolish son! The shout didn't come from me. Unexpectedly, it was Linda. A dramatic soundtrack seemed to play as Linda's face filled the screen. Or at least, that's how it felt. Then, a close-up of my husband's shocked face. Silence fell over the room. Linda, usually so quiet and never raising her voice, had taken us all by surprise. My husband, stunned by her uncharacteristic fierceness, was speechless. In the midst of this, Linda continued. Mostly took care of Ben, you say? Which mouth of yours is saying that? You do nothing but play with your phone or watch TV every day. You don't even eat at home. You barely contribute any money to the household. And to top it off, you lie about business trips to cheat. You really don't deserve a cent of the inheritance. What? Is that true? Reacting to Linda's words were Ben's brothers. Strong-looking men due to their construction business. Confronted by these imposing figures, my husband seemed even smaller. Eh? What do you mean? Mom, I might not have been home much, but the affair accusation is just baseless. Don't make random claims without any evidence. My husband was stuttering and sweating in panic. Without missing a beat, Linda produced a large envelope. Where did that come from? Did she have it hidden? I hadn't noticed it at all. Do you know what this is? It's filled with evidence of your affairs. I didn't think Kate, who worked so hard taking care of Ben, would have the means. So Ben and I hired a detective. Be prepared. With that, Linda scattered the contents of the envelope. After my husband's scream, the relatives reacted. What is this? Ugh, that's disgusting. Really, my eyes feel dirty now. The reaction from the relatives was one of disappointment. The contents were numerous embarrassing photos of my husband and his mistress. What are they even doing outdoors? I didn't know my husband had such hobbies. Never thought I'd discover such hidden sides of my husband after 20 years of marriage. Like the relatives, I was appalled. Shame on you! Doing such disgraceful things. Claiming you took care of Ben, saying Kate did nothing. insisting the inheritance is all yours. How dare you say such things? You shameless, unfilial son. Apologize to Kate. It's not like that. This is wrong. It's not wrong, you foolish son. Linda, calm down, please. You'll burst a blood vessel. It's too early to follow Ben. Perhaps it was Linda's towering rage that allowed me, the one who should be most upset, to remain calm. Linda, please calm down. Breathe in, breathe out, inhale, exhale. That foolish son. After some deep breathing, Linda calmed down a bit. But her anger was far from subsiding. Seeing her like this made me start to laugh. Kate? Surprised, Linda looked at me as I suddenly burst into laughter. I smiled at Linda and then hugged her. Thank you so much, Linda. Kate? For getting angry on my behalf, for conducting such an investigation for me. I really appreciate it. Of course. You are my precious daughter, after all. Daughter. I never realized how happy being called that could make me. Since Ben's passing, I've become quite teary, and once again, tears welled up. But I can't spend all my time crying. After stepping away from Linda, I wiped away my tears roughly and looked at my husband. You. What? Let's get a divorce. Fine by me, I'll gladly do it. I desperately suppressed another wave of laughter and then confirmed with my husband. So, about the will, about the inheritance? All right, I accept Dad's will. I looked at the lawyer, who slowly nodded. The lawyer was designated as the executor of the will. I was sure he would handle the following procedures smoothly. Taking a moment to breathe, I then moved on to another matter. Shall we begin? My statement was met with nods from Linda and the attending relatives. My husband was the only one who didn't understand. What more is there to discuss? To my clueless husband, I said with a smile. It's obvious, isn't it? The compensation claim for your affair. What? Why did he think it would all end here? With evidence of his infidelity right in front of us, it wasn't going to be just a divorce and goodbye. Don't joke! Compensation on top of the inheritance. What a greedy woman you are! Coming from someone who pushed the care of his parents onto his wife and had affairs. Really, the nerve. Don't joke is my line. We have a lawyer here, and plenty of witnesses, so why don't we have a thorough discussion? I just remembered something I have to do. What could be more important than what we're doing now? Don't run away, you fool! Before I could grab his hand, someone else grabbed my husband by the neck. It was Ben's brother, hardened by his construction work. Behind him stood Ben's equally formidable brother. They nodded in agreement. Muscles really do have an impact. After that, under the watchful eyes of the Muscle brothers, other relatives, and Linda, my husband couldn't flee. He had no choice but to stay and discuss until everything was settled. Today's another beautiful day. Looking up, the sky was cloudless and clear. Half a year had passed since then. Thanks to the lawyer, the inheritance proceedings went very smoothly. The divorce was finalized, and I was enjoying living alone. I really wanted to live with Linda, but now that we were strangers due to the divorce, Linda stubbornly refused, not wanting to make me her caregiver again. As a result, Linda moved into a nursing home with the money from selling the house. I visit her once a week. It seems like a wonderful place, and Linda seems happy. In the end, I feel like this was the best outcome. The house was sold. That means, essentially, the house was gone. As for my ex-husband, who was practically kicked out, well, according to the will, he received his share of the inheritance. He was overjoyed at first, but then his face turned pale. Why? because the inheritance had almost vanished. The reason goes without saying. Compensation, of course. My husband's inheritance was gone. Not enough from the inheritance alone, so he also had to pay from his savings. As a result, my husband ended up penniless. And more than that, it seems his affair became known at his company. Particularly among the female staff, he was given the cold shoulder and became quite isolated, leading to a series of mistakes, it seems. "That woman, she's my boss, but didn't defend me properly," he was saying over the phone. And it turns out that this boss was a woman and, astonishingly, the mistress was his boss. Maybe that explains the mysterious salary raise. But as soon as the affair came to light, he was dumped by the mistress, who also faced a demotion due to the affair and other ethics violations. I made sure she paid compensation too. That's only right. "It's your fault I kept making mistakes and got fired." He tried to blame it all on me. But that's not my problem, is it? "You got used to caring for Ben, so looking after me should be easy for you," he said, but no, that's entirely different. I couldn't respond with anything but laughter. So, I blocked his calls. I don't know what became of my husband after that. And I don't want to know. To forget about that foolish husband, I started working, and it turned out to be refreshing and enjoyable. The world is so much broader than I thought. A sense of excitement for a bright future welled up in me unknowingly. Gazing up at the contrails stretching straight across the blue sky, I squinted my eyes.
Liddy is just so cute. The voice becomes clear as the door opens, and at that name coming from Quimby's mouth, I froze. I wondered who it could be, but hearing that name confirmed it. The woman's voice was indeed my sister Liddy's. Quimby foolishly kept calling Liddy's name over and over. Shivering, I snapped to my senses. I realized I had to capture this scene on video. So, I firmly recorded the evidence on my smartphone and quietly left the spot. After a while, the two of them came out of the bedroom. Seeing me, they turned pale, and I said, "That's right, I sent the video of you two to Gabriel. Anyway, let's discuss what to do next among the four of us soon." At those words, Liddy's face turned even paler. "What? What do you mean?" "Just what it sounds like. I've got the video as evidence." "What have you done?" As I held up my smartphone, my sister became utterly frantic, and then she lunged at me. "My name is Linny, a 45-year-old housewife. I have twin boys who are in the 6th grade of elementary school. The kids are twins. I've heard that twins run in families, and indeed, I am a twin myself. I have a twin sister named Liddy. Being identical twins, we never really felt like sisters. Rather, we were more like rivals. Even if we weren't twins, it might have been the same, but I grew up always being compared to Liddy. Before long, I harbored a strong complex towards Liddy, and she, in turn, placed utmost importance on surpassing me. Liddy was always the cute and affable child. On the other hand, I was always the shy and reserved one. And because I was also a bit of an introvert, everyone's attention naturally gravitated towards Liddy whenever we met someone new. Even though we were rivals, I deeply adored Liddy. Her ever-smiling face and popularity were something I aspired to. But it seems Liddy didn't feel the same way. We used to play together a lot when we were in elementary school, but I was always stuck with the roles nobody wanted. "Linny is it!" When nobody wanted to be it in a game of tag, I was always the one forced into the role. Even when one of our friends suggested deciding by rock, paper, scissors, Liddy would pressure me, saying, "You want to do it, right, Linny?" Not wanting to be disliked by Liddy or left out, I had no choice but to agree. Liddy's manipulative behavior wasn't just limited to playtime. It was in 6th grade. We were deciding roles for a school play. We were going to perform Snow White, and I, not being much of an actress, hoped to be the narrator. But I caught a cold and had to miss school on the day of role assignments. Linny wants to be the narrator. I'll tell the teacher for you. Liddy said she'd pass on my wishes, so I trusted her and felt relieved. However, when I returned to school after recovering, I was shocked to find out I had been cast as the lead role. Why am I the lead? I asked a friend in disbelief, and then came the unbelievable reply. Liddy said you wanted to be the lead. What? I didn't say that. But it's already been decided. It seems that as we were entering puberty, no one wanted to take on the potentially embarrassing lead role of Snow White. So I, the quiet girl who was absent, was chosen. The teacher found it odd that I, usually so reserved, had expressed a desire to take the lead role. Did Linny really say that? The teacher had even checked with Liddy. Truly, she wants to, but she's too shy to volunteer. Please, let this be an opportunity for Linny to shine. But Liddy recommended me as if it was all in my best interest. I cried, insisting I couldn't do it, and didn't want to. However, everyone else's roles had already been assigned. Chastised by teachers and parents alike, I somehow managed to pull through. Thanks to that effort, the play was a huge success. Teachers, parents, and friends all praised me. But amidst all this, only Liddy looked on displeased. Anyone could have done that. Getting all that praise for such a little thing is just silly. And so she began to openly resent me. That was the moment I truly felt Liddy's dislike. After that, she stopped inviting me to play. At first, it was painful, but once I realized I was no longer being forced into unpleasant roles, I made other friends and started enjoying myself. In middle school, many didn't even know Liddy and I were twins. We had become so distant, hardly speaking at school, and didn't look alike at all. We requested not to be in the same class, and I was enjoying my own life. But then, one day, as I was studying for high school entrance exams, Liddy approached me. Studying? Have you decided which high school you're applying to? Yeah, thinking of going for A high school. A high school was the newest and closest school to our house, boasting a competitive entrance difficulty. I had been working hard for 3 years because I really wanted to get into that school. But Liddy, unaware of my efforts, laughed when she heard my choice of high school. A high school? You've gotta be kidding, right? Why don't you just go to B high school with me? It sounds like you wouldn't even need to study much for that. Liddy always managed to bend me to her will, but I didn't want her dictating my choice of high school too. For the first time, I stood up to her. I've decided to go to A high school. You don't know if it's impossible for me. If you don't want to study, that's fine, but don't get in my way. I turned away from her and went back to my textbook. What? That tone to your older sister? Angered by my response, Liddy grabbed my textbook and threw it on the floor. What are you doing? Even if you study, it's a waste, you know. You're destined to be my slave and go to B high school together. That day, we ended up in a physical fight. Our parents came running when they heard the commotion and pulled us apart. But by then, my textbook was torn to pieces. But more than that, my heart was shattered by hearing Liddy's true feelings about me. To Liddy, I was just a convenient target for all the unpleasant things. Realizing that Liddy saw me as her slave was a clear awakening, but I didn't give up on studying. Fortunately, my parents contacted the school for me, and I got a new textbook. With my parents' support, Liddy no longer interfered with my studies, and I was able to dedicate myself to them and successfully got into my chosen school. As she had initially declared, Liddy barely studied for the exams and went on to B high school. Thus, we went to different high schools, pursued our education at different universities, and eventually started our careers. As an adult, I began living on my own. And that's when I met a man. He was my husband, Quimby. Quimby and I were hired at the same time and felt a closeness because we were from the same area. When he asked me out, I felt like I was dreaming. I actually like you, Linny. I'd be happy if you'd go out with me. Hearing those words made me incredibly happy. I had feelings for Quimby too, but I had never had the courage to admit such feelings openly. I wasn't pretty like Liddy, and having had almost no experience with love during my school days, I could hardly believe he felt the same way about me. I'd be happy to. Thank you. Being in a relationship for the first time made me feel overjoyed. Since we started dating, I've been doing my best to make him happy, cooking meals and preparing lunchboxes for him. Quimby started visiting my apartment more often, and we began a life almost like we were living together. Linny, I'll cook dinner tonight. But it wasn't just me doing things for him. Quimby was also very cooperative with household chores. Doing chores together was fun, and I began to think we could make a good married couple. 3 years into our relationship, we decided to get married. I was overjoyed and very happy about it, but there was one thing that worried me. You're a twin, right? I'd like to meet your sister. Quimby brought it up. During the 3 years we were dating, I had told him that I have a twin sister, but I had never introduced him to Liddy. I hadn't even told her about having a boyfriend. Since that big fight in middle school, there had been a deep rift between us. Yeah, that's right. But if we were getting married, it was inevitable that Liddy and Quimby would meet. The thought of how Liddy might scorn us made me anxious, but I knew I had to introduce them at some point. What? Married? Since when? And when I finally called Liddy, after a long time, she seemed surprised by my news and raised her voice. I had told my parents, but it seems Liddy hadn't heard about it yet. She sounded like this was news to her. Yeah, and I want to introduce Liddy to the man I'm going to marry. I'm busy, you know. Well, if you insist, I guess I could meet him. Liddy was as condescending as ever, so I asked her to make some time for us. Liddy hadn't changed since we were kids. I figured I had to be the adult and humble myself. We went back home to meet Liddy on her day off. Quimby suggested we all have a meal together with our parents, so we arranged to meet at a restaurant. And then, on the day, we went to the restaurant, but even when the time came, Liddy didn't show up. Liddy's late. I thought she said she'd be on time. Sorry, Quimby. Don't worry about it. She'll show up eventually. Let's just wait a bit longer. Both my parents and I felt bad for keeping Quimby waiting. 15 minutes past the scheduled time, Liddy showed up in a flashy dress. Sorry, did you wait? We did. What's with the outfit? Well, it's kind of like a meet and greet, right? Thought I should dress up. I couldn't help but be exasperated by her. Not just me, but our parents just gave a wry smile. If she knew it was a meet and greet, I wish she hadn't been late without even messaging. Especially not for the sake of getting dressed up. Seemed immature for an adult. But wanting to keep the peace, I swallowed my words. We introduced Liddy and Quimby to each other. Wow, Linny, you've snagged a good-looking one. Working at the same place means he must be earning well. Liddy made several rude remarks to Quimby on their first meeting. What do you do in your free time? With Linny? No, before you started dating Linny. She grilled Quimby like it was a speed dating session. Despite our parents' attempts to stop her, Liddy kept going, saying, It's fine, I want to know what kind of man Linny's husband will be. Quimby was gracious, saying, Don't worry about it, and entertained Liddy throughout. By the end of the meal, I was exhausted and sighing. However, it didn't end there. Liddy's quite the character, huh? Opposite of Linny. I always say we're the least alike twins ever. When I responded with a forced smile, Quimby said, Maybe you should take a leaf out of Liddy's book. She's always smiling, good at conversation, and cute. If I'd met her first. I was shocked at what he meant. I had told him about my discomfort with Liddy. To hear him say this, knowing that, was deeply shocking. Why don't you marry Liddy then? She even said you were handsome. When I snapped back like that, he hurriedly apologized. Sorry, it was just a joke. I'm glad I met Linny, and I don't have any special feelings for Liddy. Then you shouldn't say things that praise Liddy and put me down. It was a joke! Quimby apologized like that. I was shocked, but I wasn't going to call off our engagement over something like this. I just hoped he understood. Right after that, he said, But Liddy is a nice girl. It's not good to be jealous of your sister. Let's all get along as a family now. We're adults. Things are different than they were. I had my reservations, but I knew our parents wanted Linny and me to get along, but I wanted Quimby to be on my side. Why was he trying to bring me and Liddy closer? But it's not like we'd be interacting much anyway. Arguing seemed too troublesome, so I just nodded along to Quimby's words. A few days later, I got a message from Liddy. Isn't Quimby too good for you? Should I take him off your hands? I was chilled by her message. What are you talking about? I replied instinctively, and she called immediately. Just what I said. It's unbelievable someone as dull as Linny will get married before me. Liddy insulted me over the phone and laughed. He's high-earning and well-educated. Why not hand him over to me? We're twins. We've always shared everything. Don't say stupid things. I yelled back at Liddy. I couldn't stand Quimby being treated like an object, nor the notion that we had always shared everything. That's ridiculous. I was always just someone for Liddy to dump the things she didn't want on. That night, I told Quimby about this, warning him to be careful around Liddy. But Quimby seemed to take it lightly, laughing off my words. It's nice to be liked that much. Don't worry, Liddy's not serious. It's not funny. You don't know what Liddy might do. Do you doubt my feelings? It's okay because I said it's okay. Despite him being such a wonderful person, I felt like Quimby had changed after meeting Liddy. Quimby would affirm everything when it came to Liddy, just because she's my sister. Other than that, he was the same wonderful partner as always, but I was dissatisfied with how he changed whenever Liddy was involved. Don't worry so much. But as Quimby said, if he himself didn't sway, there was nothing Liddy could do. Feeling unsettled by her words was proof I hadn't fully trusted Quimby. So, I was admonished. Indeed, he was right. I decided to trust Quimby and ignore Liddy's words. Even afterward, Liddy sent me spiteful messages, but I never replied. Fortunately, Liddy didn't interfere with us, and I prayed we could become wonderful sisters while leading a happy married life. Years went by. After I turned 40, my parents told me that Liddy had gotten married. By then, I had blocked her and wasn't in contact. Although we occasionally saw each other at our parents' home, Liddy would insult me. Being nearly 40 and still unmarried, Liddy had become resentful towards me, and it seemed she was avoiding me as well. I thought Liddy, being quite picky, wouldn't marry, but I was genuinely glad for her when I heard she had found someone. I realized how terrible I had been when Liddy got married, only after I got married myself. Moreover, through my parents, Liddy apologized to me. After that, we started communicating again. Indeed, Liddy had changed, becoming much calmer than before. It was as if she had returned to the Liddy I once loved. I never thought the day would come when Liddy and I could laugh together again, so I was very happy. Liddy even introduced me to her husband. He was about 5 years our senior, named Gabriel. He seemed to care for Liddy deeply, which reassured me. Having both married, Liddy and I became closer. Our parents were very happy to see us getting along. I wanted to make up for the time we had spent apart. Then, a few years later, something happened. I became ill at work and had to leave early. I wanted to inform Quimby, but he was out on business, so I left a message with a colleague. I went straight home. Upon entering the house, I immediately sensed something was off. It felt like there was someone inside, even though the house was supposed to be empty. Could it be a burglar? That thought flashed through my mind as I quietly entered. Listening closely, I could hear noises and voices coming from the bedroom. As I stood silently in front of the bedroom, I recognized Quimby's voice coming from inside, but I couldn't bring myself to speak up. The nature of his voice drained the blood from my face. It was unmistakably the sound of an intimate moment. The creaking of the bed confirmed my fears. I didn't need to see inside to know what was happening, and my hands trembled. However, if Quimby was cheating, I had to catch him in the act. With that thought, I carefully opened the door with my smartphone in hand, ready to record. What I saw inside the bedroom was even more shocking. Liddy is really cute, isn't she? The voice became clearer as the door opened. Hearing Quimby say her name, I froze. Now that he mentioned it, the female's voice was indeed Liddy's. Quimby kept foolishly repeating Liddy's name. Trembling, I recorded the scene and quietly left. I sat in the dining area in shock for a while. I was supposed to be home early due to feeling unwell, but that shock made me forget my illness. Staring blankly at my phone, I just waited for this nightmare to end. Then, a few minutes later, the bedroom door opened. "I'll head back to work now, so lock up," said a voice. "Okay. It'd be nice if we could live together soon." Hearing this, I hurriedly stood up. Noticing the noise, Quimby and Liddy saw me in the hallway. "Linny, why are you here?" Quimby exclaimed, turning pale. "Why? This is my house, right? But why is Liddy here? Aren't you both supposed to be at work?" Liddy looked away for a moment, but then smirked defiantly. "Why do you think? You wanted it from my own mouth, didn't you?" "Liddy!" Quimby tried to stop her, but Liddy wouldn't be silenced. "I've always hated how you look down on me. Happiness and Quimby don't suit you. I'll take everything." With that, Liddy declared. I just smiled at her words. "Is that so? Then I'll give you Quimby." Liddy, but don't think you can take my happiness." Liddy seemed annoyed by my retort, glaring at me. To that, I continued, addressing her directly. "Yeah, I sent the video to Gabriel. Let's discuss this as a group of 4 sometime soon." Liddy's face turned pale instantly. "What do you mean?" "Just what I said. If you want Quimby, Gabriel should know about this, shouldn't he?" "What have you done?" Liddy lunged at me. "Liddy, calm down!" "How can I calm down?" Quimby tried to stop her, but Liddy was beyond reason. Just then, the smartphone inside Liddy's bag rang. At that sound, Liddy froze in place. "Looks like Gabriel's calling, isn't it?" Liddy, pale-faced, hesitantly looked at her bag, but there was no sign of her answering the call. In the silent room, only the sound of the phone echoed. After a while, it stopped ringing, and then my phone rang. See? Since Liddy didn't answer, now he's calling me. "Linny, I'm truly sorry. Please forgive Liddy. Can you somehow cover for her with Gabriel? If not, Liddy will lose everything." Quimby started making statements as if to protect Liddy. Liddy, standing next to him, began to sob bitterly, as if she were the tragic heroine. What Quimby said made sense. Actually, Gabriel is not only Liddy's husband, but also the president of the company where she works. If Gabriel learns about Liddy's infidelity, divorce talks might start, and she might not be able to continue working at his company, especially now, during work hours. There's no room for sympathy, though it seems harsh. She did this knowing full well she could lose everything? I can't possibly cover for her. I said that. "That's too harsh." Quimby, as usual, tried to defend Liddy. His words infuriated me, and I glared at Quimby. "Worried about her? Thinking Liddy is the only one who's going to lose her family and job is a huge mistake." At my shout, Quimby flinched, then started sweating profusely. It was as if he suddenly came to his senses, starting to break out in a cold sweat. He must have understood the meaning of my words. "Just so you know, I've also sent the video to the company's main email address, including your department and name." "What have you done?" By then, Gabriel's call had ended. Quimby and Liddy stood frozen, with a look of despair. After kicking them out, I called Gabriel. "Sorry to disturb you at work. It's about the video, right?" "Yes. It involves Quimby, doesn't it?" "Yes." I replied to Gabriel's gentle voice. "I'm sorry for asking this of you." He said that. Actually, Gabriel had consulted me because he felt something was off with Liddy. It might have been plausible for the old Liddy, but the current Liddy truly loved Gabriel. I didn't think she would cheat, and I had conveyed as much to Gabriel. but just in case, he had asked me to gather evidence if Liddy did something questionable. That's why I think I was able to film calmly. Please don't apologize. I'm glad I could capture evidence of Quimby's infidelity. If you hadn't asked me, I probably wouldn't have thought to do so calmly. I told Gabriel. It would be a lie to say I wasn't shocked. It's shocking enough to discover an affair, let alone with one's own sister. I had every right to be angry. My sons will be home soon, so let's talk another time. I told Gabriel and hung up. Tears flowed endlessly, but for my sons and for my own future, I knew I had to be strong. That day, I went about my usual routines, and when the kids had settled down for the night, Quimby came home. "Were you with Liddy?" I asked him, and Quimby, clearly in a bad mood, snapped back at me. "I got called into HR because of you. The decision on my punishment will come later. What are you going to do about this?" The way Quimby turned the blame on me, making me out to be the villain despite his actions, made me almost laugh. Crying over such a man was a waste of time. There's nothing to be done. Do as you please. You understand the situation, right? If we divorce, I'm taking the kids. Still want a divorce? His attempt to use our sons as leverage was pathetic, and I told him so. What are you talking about? You think you'll get custody after likely losing your job? Divorce is a foregone conclusion. Stop being ridiculous. Quimby had nothing to say. Of course. Getting caught in adultery during work hours? Dismissal seemed inevitable. Was he still so clueless about the gravity of his actions? If that's the case, then he's incredibly foolish. I'll be leaving tomorrow. Wait a minute. Can't we consider starting over? Can't you forgive just one affair? Quimby, now taking a submissive stance, began apologizing to the assertive me. One time? I asked back. According to Gabriel, Liddy's behavior had been odd for several months. Given Gabriel's job involves mostly being out for sales, there's a good chance she might have been returning home like this. Just one? Quimby responded weakly to my question, his eyes darting around. From the lack of confidence in his answer, it was clear it wasn't just once. It felt ridiculous to pursue it any further, so I dropped the subject. The next day, I told my sons about Quimby's infidelity. They are in 6th grade now, old enough to understand that hurting and betraying others is wrong. I apologized for having such a conversation at this sensitive time in their lives, and they said they wanted to talk it over alone and went to their room. After just a few minutes, they came out with their bags packed and said, "We're on your side, Mom." I couldn't help but cry. The boys laughed and comforted me as I apologized again. Then we went back to my parents' house. My parents were speechless when they heard about Liddy and Quimby's actions. Despite being happy that we had become close as sisters again, I felt sorry, but Mom apologized to me, crying. "Liddy hasn't changed after all. I'm sorry for always making you endure her." "Cut ties with both Liddy and Quimby. We will keep our distance from Liddy to the bare minimum," Dad said, and I felt relieved. From that day, I started commuting to work from my parents' home. Quimby, perhaps on suspension, didn't come to the office but called me multiple times instead. Ignoring him as I didn't have time to deal with it, he began to send messages day and night. "I love you, Linny. Let's live happily as a family of 4 again." I was insane. I was just deceived by that woman. "I don't know how to live without you, Linny." Perhaps these were what you'd call Romeo emails. I was almost fooled for a moment, but thanks to my sons laughing uproariously at those messages, I realized how ridiculous they were. However, I couldn't ignore him forever. Eventually, I had to meet him to sign the divorce papers. I made plans to meet Quimby at a cafe on my day off. Choosing to meet at a cafe instead of going home was Gabriel's advice. He said that being in a public place would help keep the conversation calm. When Gabriel and Liddy arrived at the cafe together, Liddy had become so thin in just a few days. She looked like a different person. She must have fallen out of favor with Gabriel. Serves her right. Now, both Liddy and Quimby, please sign the divorce papers. It seemed Liddy was also reluctant to divorce. To the two hesitating to sign, Quimby said, "It's a misunderstanding, Gabriel. It's your choice to divorce, but we won't." "Are you still saying that? My sons and I no longer consider you family," I retorted. I addressed Quimby's desperate attempts. Gabriel sighed deeply and said, "You could go to court, but it's clear you'll lose, considering the alimony and legal fees for the divorce trial. Can you afford it?" "Alimony for the divorce trial? Of course. You both betrayed your families. Liddy to me and Linny. Quimby, you'll have to pay us a proper settlement in the divorce trial." Liddy started trembling silently. Her silence and weight loss now made sense. "What am I supposed to do? I might be fired. How can I pay?" Quimby began to argue, pale-faced. "You did this to yourself. Besides, you owe child support for both kids. Right, Liddy?" At my words, Liddy flinched. "You wanted to live together, right? You're welcome to have the house." I laughed loudly. "And don't forget the mortgage payments!" Quimby was taken aback, probably having forgotten about the mortgage. Both sat sweating, pale, and silent in front of the divorce papers. Later, Gabriel introduced me to a lawyer, and I managed to claim alimony and legal fees, and finalized the divorce. Quimby, who had resisted divorce so much, proposed to Liddy immediately after our divorce was finalized. I knew he had liked Liddy from the start. When did their affair turn serious? Hearing this, I felt nothing but disdain. Meanwhile, Liddy, who had genuinely loved Gabriel, was abandoned, and eventually lost her job too. Why did she end up with Quimby, despite loving Gabriel so much? Remaining puzzled, I asked Gabriel about it. He hesitated before revealing, "Actually, she started complaining about you a few months ago." "Really?" "Complaining about how you, who are useless, got married and even have kids. It's extravagant," he explained. Could it really be because of that? I wondered. But considering Liddy's personality, it wasn't impossible. Yet, the thought that she went to such lengths just to set me up was horrifying. "It was because I thought you might be in danger that I consulted Linny, but I never imagined it would lead to this with Quimby. I'm truly sorry," Gabriel said apologetically. "It's okay, it's over now. And Quimby is to blame for taking up Liddy's invitation as well." That concluded our conversation. Gabriel and I agreed to keep in touch for updates on the divorce compensation and legal consultations. According to him, the two burdened with a substantial amount of divorce compensation ended up marrying and living together. Liddy was abandoned by her parents and had nowhere else to go. It seemed she reluctantly accepted Quimby's proposal because she had no family left. From what the lawyer told me, Liddy couldn't accept that she ended up divorcing Gabriel and marrying Quimby, whom she didn't love, because of me. The lawyer mentioned getting hurled with abusive language every time he called her. While I felt sorry for the lawyer, he continued to support me firmly, perhaps because of Gabriel's presence, and I couldn't be more grateful. For a while, we'll still have to make calls to demand the divorce compensation, and it seems I'll continue to rely on their support. 5 years passed. The divorce compensation and child support were being paid on time, and my emotional wounds had largely healed. One day, after a long period of calm, the lawyer contacted me. "Liddy says she has something to talk to you about." I refused. Knowing her, it would likely end up with her using me as a verbal punching bag for stress relief. I decided never to trust or forgive Liddy again, and asked the lawyer to convey my refusal. However, Liddy insisted it was urgent, and Quimby also requested a meeting on her behalf. Given their persistence, I reluctantly agreed. However, lacking the courage to meet them alone, I contacted Gabriel, feeling somewhat guilty for doing so after such a long time. He gladly agreed to accompany me, and so I met with them after a long while. Quimby and Liddy were sitting at the cafe with a solemn demeanor. When Liddy saw my face, she looked slightly relieved. "What's this about? Why did you call me here?" I asked, and Liddy said, "Actually, I've developed renal failure and need to undergo dialysis." I was taken aback. "It's your fault!" "No, both of your faults, that Liddy ended up like this. She couldn't sleep without drinking alcohol, and yet because of the divorce settlement payments, she had to work. Your actions have destroyed her health." Quimby angrily blamed us, but I thought it was their own doing. Gabriel seemed to agree, as he sighed and looked exasperated. "So what? I'm not reducing or refunding the divorce settlement. Be thankful I agreed to installments." I stood firm, and Liddy, crying, lowered her head. "I'll pay the divorce settlement. Please, I'm begging you. Give me a kidney." "What?" I exclaimed loudly at her outrageous request. "What are you talking about? There's no way I give it to you." When I refused, Quimby said, "You were born with a twin with Liddy for this reason. You have a duty to help her." "What are you talking about? Who has been pushing all the unpleasant things onto me? Did Liddy ever help me once in such situations?" "Don't talk about trivial matters. Liddy's life is at stake here," Quimby angrily retorted. Liddy began to cry and plead, apologizing. Quimby insulted me as heartless, pressuring me for the transplant as if threatening. At that moment, feeling as though I was being blamed, Gabriel spoke up. "If she needs dialysis, then undergo dialysis. Do you understand how tough dialysis is? And do you understand how difficult a transplant is? Why should she risk her life for Liddy?" Their words left them speechless. I felt relieved with Gabriel's support and caught my breath. "Moreover, Liddy, you've repeatedly called Linny useless. Isn't it too convenient to ask for help only when you're in trouble?" "But that's..." "Liddy, you've destroyed Linny's happy life. Linny has no obligation to save your life." Liddy broke down crying, and Quimby was at a loss for words. Both of them must have thought that I would surely give them a kidney. If I had been alone, I might have been persuaded. Once again, Gabriel saved me. "Take care then. Oh, and don't forget the transfer for this month's payment." With that, I got up and left. Whether I'm called heartless or a devil, I cannot forgive them both. I don't know what kind of life they will lead from now on, but I hope they never forget what they did and reflect on it. It seems Quimby and Liddy were both working part-time to make ends meet, but now that Liddy can no longer work properly, their financial situation is dire. But that's their karma. Everything is the result of their actions. Their atonement won't end until they've paid the compensation ordered in the divorce settlement. I continue to live happily with my parents and sons. My parents no longer even mention Liddy's name. However, it seems they are happy to see the twins getting along well. It's comforting to see a bond between my sons that Liddy and I never had. I continue to keep in touch with Gabriel frequently. He's a genuinely good person, always thoughtful and considerate. It appears he has developed feelings for me, but I'm not ready to reciprocate them at this time. I don't want to cause any more upset for my sons. But in a few years, when they come of age, I hope to have the chance to think about my own happiness again.
Sorry to always be a bother. Thanks again for this time. Ava said this with a smile, seemingly without any guilt for making us pay. She just hitches a ride on her trips as usual, thinking of my husband James as nothing more than a walking wallet. I let out another sigh, lost count of how many it's been. By the way, Ava's parents are coming this time too. This sudden change of plans caught me off guard. Of course, Ava has no intention of paying for her parents either. James, too, won't say a word about paying in front of Ava, just pretending to be generous. I knew he'd come back to me later demanding, "You pay half." Surprised by this unexpected news, I secretly smirked, seeing it as a chance for revenge. Watching James get all excited, I chuckled to myself. Yeah, sure, it's fine. After all, this is the last time. Last time? I nodded with a big smile. The two of them looked surprised for a moment, but then burst into laughter, thinking it was just a joke. They seemed to think my words were just a joke, laughing it off and resuming their conversation. Watching the two of them get carried away, I didn't bother to respond. I was biding my time, caressing the tool I had hidden in my bag, eagerly awaiting the moment for my revenge. I'm Camilla, turning 63 this year. My husband and I, we've always loved traveling. We used to arrange trips several times a year around our work. Even after having kids and retiring, this didn't change. I thought we'd continue enjoying our hobby, but then things changed when Ava, the wife of our eldest son William, came into our lives. After William got married, Ava started visiting us often. William, busy with work, was relieved to know Ava was at her parents' home, so I didn't say anything. We were happy, a woman Ava's age, almost like a daughter to us, coming to visit. But I started feeling uncomfortable with my husband James's attitude towards Ava. Thanks for dinner, as always. It's nothing. I enjoy cooking when you're here. That's right, cooking's about the only hobby Camilla has. She's really happy when you visit. James sometimes put me down when talking with Ava. Comparing me and Ava with a mother-daughter age gap, he'd say things like, Ava has such beautiful skin, or Camilla should learn from Ava's high sense of beauty. Sure, Ava always comes over looking nice with her hair and dress, but being compared to someone a generation apart is troubling for both me and Ava. I'd reprimand James when he got carried away with his drinks, saying all these nice things. Hey, can you stop? You're making Ava uncomfortable. What's wrong? Can't I say the truth? Are you jealous of Ava's beauty? Of course not. What are you talking about? Then don't complain. Ava, sorry about this. Camilla, unlike you, is getting on in years and tends to get angry easily. James said this with a laugh, unrepentant as ever, and I sighed. Maybe because we never had a daughter, James was overjoyed when our son brought home someone as charming as Ava. But lately, James' behavior seems too much. He's not just mocking me, he pays excessive attention to Ava. I thought it was a joke at first, but I can't forget what James blurted out in his excitement. James, you're always so kind to me. I'm really grateful. Right? I bet I'm a better man than William, huh? What are you saying? William has always been soft. I can protect Ava. James was practically telling Ava that he's a better man than William. The fact that James would say such things to Ava, his son's wife, filled me with disgust. By the way, you two travel a lot, right? William told me. Yes, it's been our hobby for years. Lucky. William's too busy with work to travel anymore. Ava said this with a slight sadness in her smile, looking at James. I could easily guess James's next words, feeling a chill at Ava's anticipatory expression. Well, how about you join us on our next trip? Really? I feel bad, though. James's face lit up, happily inviting Ava. James seemed to have no intention of considering my opinion from the start. Ava, saying, I feel bad, showed no signs of reluctance. She looked at me with her hands on her cheeks. But I don't have money to spare. Don't worry. We invited you. We'll pay, right? Well... James eagerly sought my agreement, and Ava, hugging James in triumph, thanked him cheerfully. Her triumphant look might have been my imagination, but she definitely squinted at me with a sly smile. We're planning to leave next month, so get ready. Okay, I understand. Thank you. I could only watch the two of them excitedly ignoring me with a cold gaze. What about the hotel? We haven't booked for Ava. We'll just have to do it now. Take care of it, will you? Why should I handle it when you happily invited her? Camilla, why are you so cold when Ava's willing to come? After Ava left, I told James we only booked for 2. He responded as if I was being unreasonable. He insisted I be nice to Ava but wouldn't make hotel reservations or buy theater tickets himself. He even hesitated to cover the costs he boasted about. His attitude frustrated me, especially when he joked, "Ava can even sleep in my room if necessary." This discomfort continued throughout the trip. James spent the entire trip pleasing Ava. If Ava said, "I'm not interested in the theater," he'd waste our carefully prepared tickets and change plans. He wooed her without reproach, leaving me disheartened. "Hey, Ava, I hate to say it, but it's troubling when our plans get disrupted. I'm sorry. I got carried away because James is so kind." "It's okay. I'm happier when you rely on me." No matter what I said, Ava would look at James and he'd end up scolding me instead. Ava knew James was on her side, often making provocative statements, and James would always retort, "What's wrong with doting on my son's wife?" "I'm sorry, I'm always having fun at your expense. I'm just a nuisance, aren't I?" "Not at all. I'm really enjoying myself with you here. Camilla's the one who's always complaining, more of a nuisance." "Are you serious?" Emboldened, Ava started timing her visits to our home, joining our trips as if it were a given. Perhaps James had been inviting her in advance for these trips, yet he never told me. Despite this, I was mostly left to handle the travel expenses caused by Ava. During the trips, Ava never attempted to pay, always leaving it to James. She didn't even bother to bring her wallet. "This is cute. I'd like it as a souvenir." "Sure, I'll buy it for you." "Really? Thank you." James's eagerness to please Ava only led to more extra payments. And later, James would grudgingly hand over money, claiming, "I'm just responding to Ava's requests." What should have been enjoyable trips became nothing but an unnecessary expense, and my frustration grew. Repeated trips like these were grating on my nerves. Talking to them didn't help, so I decided to speak directly to William about Ava. However, the response I got from William was worse than I could have imagined. "Hey, William, Ava's always tagging along on our trips. Can something be done about it?" "Well, I heard Dad happily invites her. They make decisions without consulting me, and she doesn't pay." "Wait, what? That's odd. I heard she pays her own way." It seems William had been misled by Ava. He believed Ava was paying her own way on trips because James forcefully invited her. Of course, I hadn't received a dime from Ava, and knowing James, he wouldn't have taken money from her either. Yet William seemed to think I was making up stories to harass Ava. That's not a joke. If you think that, she doesn't need to come anymore. Ava's trying to get along with you and Dad. There's no need to talk like that. How can I get along with someone who makes up lies and plays the victim? I tried explaining the truth to William, but I had no proof that Ava wasn't paying for the trips. William seemed torn about who to believe. Later, he talked to Ava again, who insisted, "I've been paying my share." In fact, she tearfully told William, "Camilla's falsely accusing me of not paying even though I do. She hates me." Moved by her tears, William seemed to side with Ava, sighing over the phone. Frustrated with William's doubts, I felt at a loss. Ava never even opens her wallet when she comes on trips. She says she has no disposable income since she's not working, but she says she's paying. If that's true, then she's using your earnings for the trips, right? If you really believe she's paying, calculate exactly how much she's contributed. In a situation with no allies, I rebuked William harshly. I was at my limit with Ava's manipulative behavior and James's complacency in paying for her. I decided to take revenge, gathering information to convince William. On the next trip, Ava joined us in her usual manner. Her small, high-brand bag seemed to hold only her mobile phone, certainly no wallet. "Sorry to be a bother. Thanks again for this time." Ava said this with a smile, seemingly guilt-free about making us pay. She casually got into the passenger seat of James's car and gave him a friendly smile. Watching Ava, James smiled back. Seeing them, I sighed again. Normally, I would have just endured it for my own peace, but not this time. Clearing my throat in the back seat, I glared at the two, planning to plunge them into hell. "James, about today's trip. How about here? I've always wanted to go." "Sure, I'll take you wherever you want." "I'm so happy. Thank you." Ava, who hadn't brought a penny, seemed well prepared with places she wanted to go. showing James on her mobile phone, completely disregarding the original plan. Ignoring the usual, I checked my preparations for the revenge. Then James, as if remembering, turned and dropped a bombshell. Right, Ava's parents are coming too. What? I told my parents about our trips and they got jealous. So I thought, why not invite Ava's parents too? I'll pay for everything so Ava doesn't have to worry. James conveyed this with a smile to Ava, glancing at me with a side eye. Shocked by the sudden change of plans, I was taken aback. Naturally, Ava wouldn't intend to pay for her parents and James wouldn't dare suggest it in front of her, acting all generous. I was sure that once we got back, James would again tell me, "You pay half." Stunned and irritated by this unexpected news, I smirked, sensing my chance for revenge. Well, that's convenient. Smiling, I said that, and James looked at me with a nasty grin. Right. He resumed driving in high spirits, even starting to hum. Maybe he misunderstood that his wife's approving meant he could impress Ava's parents. Or perhaps he thought I'd generously pay, having agreed so easily. Watching his buoyant demeanor, I chuckled to myself. Thank you, Camilla. It's okay, this is the last time. The last time? I nodded with a full smile. The two looked surprised at me for a moment, but soon laughed, thinking it was just a joke. They didn't take my words seriously. Ava is our dear son's wife after all. We'll keep traveling together, right? Of course. So I'm counting on you in the future, Camilla. I kept smiling but didn't respond to the two of them, getting carried away. Knowing the unexpected events James hadn't told me about, it was all bearable thinking these two would soon see hell. In the evening, we arrived at the hotel and met Ava's parents. Then we were shown to our rooms. As usual, Ava and James said they would rest in their respective rooms. Of course, they were in separate rooms, but I knew exactly what they were up to when they said this. So I intentionally told them, I think I'll have a drink with Ava's parents. Sounds good. Have fun. I deliberately left them alone, and as they said, have fun, Ava waved at me with a smile. Her attitude seemed to imply that it was more convenient for me not to be there, which confirmed my suspicions. Anticipating the need to leave evidence, I approached Ava's parents. May I show you something? They looked puzzled, so I quietly turned on my mobile phone and showed them a video. Nice room. Your room looks great too. Really? Then you can come to my room. What I started showing them was a video from a camera I had just set up in the room. It was in the room where James and I were staying, and Ava appeared as if it was natural. Ava's parents watched, puzzled by their familiar behavior. I always arrange the hotel and trips for you. We could even travel just the two of us, without Camilla. That's too bad for Camilla. But Camilla's really angry that I don't pay. Don't worry about it, Ava. I'll talk sternly to Camilla. The screen continuously showed Ava flirting with James and him being visibly pleased by it. Their interaction, which didn't seem fitting for a conversation between a father-in-law and a daughter-in-law, grew more animated and seemed to mock me. Seeing her own daughter speak with such terrible insults about me, Penelope, Ava's mom, looked at me with a pale face. What in the world? What is Ava doing? This video is from a camera in my and my husband's room. It seems Ava is talking with my husband right now. This trip was supposed to be Ava expressing her gratitude to us. Oh, was it? I only learned today that you and your husband were coming. They seem to have decided everything on their own. I candidly told them everything about the past trips. I mentioned that Ava had not contributed any money, James's attitude, and how they both disregarded me. As I explained, Ava and James, captured on camera, seemed to be confessing. Their expressions changed rapidly, turning red and then pale as they watched the video. Throughout, I silently recorded James' inappropriate words, which didn't seem fitting for a conversation with his son's wife. Our daughter, I don't know how to apologize. I appreciate your understanding. I plan to cut ties with James and Ava after this. Feeling it was cruel to torment them further, I decided it was time to reveal the truth and headed to the room. Opening the door, James exclaimed, "Camilla, what's with the sudden entrance? What, is it a problem if I return to my own room?" "I didn't say that, but don't just open the door like that, it's startling." "Oh, sorry, I thought you had something to hide and were startled." Saying this, I replayed the video in front of them. Noticing Ava's parents behind me, their behavior became suspicious. "Did you want to travel alone? Were my presence and Ava's parents a bother?" "Well, that's... Ava's parents told me if you invite them on a trip to express gratitude, shouldn't you pay yourself?" "What? No, that's not it. James said he'd pay for me." Ava desperately defended herself, and James spouted nonsensical outrage for setting up the camera. Seeing them unable to apologize even now, I felt my heart growing colder. Is this conversation true? William? At that moment, our eldest son, William, who was supposed to be away on a business trip, appeared unexpectedly. Ava turned pale with surprise at this unexpected guest. Of course, I had called William beforehand, preparing for this moment. Sensing something was wrong with the inconsistent travel expenses in the household accounts, William was no longer in Ava's corner. "Ava, were you lying?" "No, James said he would take care of the expenses. I just got a little carried away, believe me." "Oh, really? James, you made me pay all this time saying Ava didn't have any money." I played another video on my mobile phone at full volume. It showed a pathetic conversation where James grudgingly paid for the trip. "Poor Ava, so I'll pay for her." And other nonsensical excuses from James filled the room. "This man is broke. He made me pay for everything." "How awful! I thought you had money, so I indulged a bit." Ava's true nature burst out as she listened to James' shameful words. Penelope, who had been silently listening, sharply rebuked a sheepish James and an argumentative Ava. "Who's the worst here? I'm ashamed to be her mother." Penelope scolded Ava, her face turning red with anger. The intensity of her expression left William and me speechless. "Ava is no longer my daughter. I should never have believed she was giving a trip as a present." "I didn't mean it like that. This is terrible." Overwhelmed, Penelope's voice echoed across the floor. James then quietly approached me, saying, "I was wrong to try to impress my son's wife." James finally offered an apology in a low voice, but his attitude, as if expecting forgiveness just because he apologized, pushed me to my breaking point. "I told you this trip was the last. I don't need a husband who spoils his son's wife too much." "Why? I'm apologizing. Do you think an apology is enough? I'm utterly disappointed." With that, I handed him the completed divorce papers. Realizing the irreversibility of his actions, James collapsed to his knees, head bowed. After the disastrous trip, William apologized, now knowing the truth. Ava, chastened by her parents, agreed to work and repay the money she owed for the trips. William wouldn't help her, and she started working part-time. I heard the high-brand bags and accessories James had lavished on Ava were also confiscated. James, for his part, was going around saying, "I got divorced because I was financially drained by Ava," which led to another uproar. Apparently, he demanded money back from Ava, causing a commotion. "Dad, was he always like that? I only remember him being good to you." "Was he? Now that I think about it, he always seemed like a careless person who just shared a hobby of traveling with me." I listened to William's complaints about James, disillusioned by his lack of fatherly dignity, but to me it was a story that only confirmed that divorcing was the right decision. James, having nearly drained our savings by excessively indulging Ava, and I finally divorced. I'm now living comfortably alone, having kicked him out. Free from the restraint I had endured till now, I'm planning travels to places I want to visit without anyone's interference.